Hey guys, what's up? This is Calm, and what I'm going to do is come to you with the fourth game of the FIDE World Rapid. This was played on the 6th of June, so I'm getting a bit slower at this, but, I'm still interested. I'm trying out some new streaming software, recording software, actually this time round, which makes the file sizes a lot smaller, and I'm hoping that the quality isn't that much worse. I've been using it for some other things, and it's working out pretty well, so hopefully I can do all my videos like this, then I don't have the huge processing time that I do have in Camtasia. What I'm using now is OBS, Open Broadcaster Source, or something like that, software. So, yeah, we're going to get into this. This is Mamedyarov as white against Alexei Dreev, 2668 compared to Mamedyarov's 2753. So I'd imagine that Mamedyarov is looking for, to try and push this as white, about 80 points rating advantage. Okay, so he starts knight f3. I prefer when he starts via d4, just because that's what I've been playing recently, but I guess we'll see how it goes. A lot of these one knight f3 lines you transpose into d4 lines, so we'll see. d5, g3. Okay, I would have much preferred d4 there, but that's just personal preference. That's just me commentating on how my style would benefit from seeing his games is when he plays the same openings I do, essentially. So this, I mean, it's a fine opening, obviously, but it'll be harder for me to learn something from it. So we just have a Slav setup from Dreev. It's pretty normal. I've played very similar to this as white before. I used to play this way in basically all the bullet games I did, 1 and 2 minute. I just do a very quick kingside fianchetto, basically some King's Indian attack kind of line, where I play d3, knight d2, e4, castles, along with this knight f3, g3, bishop g2 kind of setup. And this is a very common response as black. Black just aims to take away this knight on f3, and then it can build a strong centre with e5, and it's pretty much gives some equality. It generally goes into a long game, so the better player usually wins. But black certainly doesn't have any trouble in the opening relative to e4 and d4 lines, let's say. Castles, 97. Generally, black will wait to take on f3 until he absolutely has to, or in the case of h3 he might play bishop h5, and then on g4, bishop back with the idea of h5 to open this up. It's just a good idea to get this bishop developed outside of this pawn chain, which obviously if he played 97 a move earlier to help push the c5, then he'd be blocking in this bishop. So I'd expect d4 now to stop the c5 move, and if he doesn't play it, then he's going to go for some d3 e4 push, which is playable, but I don't really think it's going to give white anything at all, really. Okay, so he does play d4. So now just d6, knight bd2, bishop f6. This is all just normal development. But actually go for some either bishop e7 or bishop d6. If he goes for bishop d6, he'll be looking to, prevent white from playing knight e5 and pushing e5 himself, which is a line you very typically see in black play at club level, because oftentimes black's going to be trying to play for, advantage, or just push to open up the game more, to have a more normal game, to just accept a passive position as black with, say, bishop e7 and keeping this pawn structure static for the moment, even though it's just likely to be a temporary measure, and if he's going for bishop e7 he'll likely go for a c5 push later on, possibly supported by b6. That's just because a high level player knows that he can delay this until after he's castled, for example. I think it'd be more common to see just bishop d6 and e5, pretty quickly against the low level player. Well, just because they're not as concerned about the king position as perhaps they should be. At the same time, you can say high-level players are maybe over-concerned about it, just because it's a general principle, and they always try and stick to these general principles, although they know when to disregard it. It's generally a general principle for a reason. Perhaps it doesn't seem necessary to people, but it's also beneficial in just waiting to see how your opponent moves, while still having all your moves as something constructive towards your overall plan of getting your king safe and things, which waiting from lower level players can often be just playing random moves which don't particularly work towards your plan, whilst avoiding the main kind of critical push lines or whatever. Rook e1. So white's looking for an e4 push, basically, opening up this rook, because at the moment this rook just has, well, this f1 square it looks at. If we get rid of this pawn, then it would look down the half-open e-file, which would be obviously much better. Okay, bishop e7 is played, so black's going to be looking for a c5 push later on as opposed to e5. And now white plays this e4 push. So black could take, but the problem with this is that after the trades of the knights, this rook is going to be on e4, and although it can be pushed away very quickly, let's say knight f6 for example, the rook can just retreat and it's got this whole open file. The black blockade along these c6 d5 squares, which is what I talked about when I said that black was entering a Slav setup early on, is very much diminished when he takes an e4, because this bishop here has less opposition along this diagonal, because these pawns will be removed, so it's just the c6 pawn then. And given that we know that black's main plan is going to be c5, which we just talked about, to try and get counterplay of his own, that would further weaken this diagonal, so I don't think black is going to take on e4. Most likely he will ignore it. You may say, can't he just play e5? But then I think, we can just move this knight. I guess it goes to h5 then, and after h3 you just... Well, maybe it can get a bit awkward there. You kind of have to trade on f3 and then play g6 to support it, but the position is relatively solid, and he's gonna not have to worry about this g2 bishop, and we can still carry on with the c5 plan, which will later open up this and make the e5 pawn weaker. Although it's still pretty strong, supported by a knight and a rook, but I'm not sure that white would really be able to make much of that position, even though this knight would be somewhat offsides, because this knight can always be rerouted via g7 and f5. f5 would be a good square for it. And this g6 move to allow knight g7 would already have been played to support this knight h5, so I think because white has no attack at any point, it's not a big worry having this knight on the rim, and it's not something that white will be particularly enamoured with trying to get that position, because again, as we say, this bishop will be blocked in, and it's hard for white to really achieve much against black's eventual c5 push. It's black castles, which is good, because if he took there, it would just ruin my whole analysis. c3, which makes sense, because this d4 pawn is going to be undermined at some point, and we want to stop black taking all the centre. Okay, c5 played now, and this e5 move. And now, given that we have the time after castles, knight e8 is probably a better spot than knight h5, just because it's more central. We can play f6 in the future to potentially play against this, or maybe better would just be g6 again and rerouting the knight via g7 to f5, or via c7 with like b5, c4 push, something like that, getting some queenside play going. Knight e8 is basically just more central, so you have more options with it. But we couldn't play it before in that line I was analysing because the king was still on e8. So whether it's beneficial for white to delay this move when he's going to play it anyway. I kind of doubt. To me, if we were going to force this knight away, why don't we play it like the move earlier? So, I don't particularly like this setup from white, although it's fine. It's probably a tiny bit better, just from having the, white opening advantage of moving first. It doesn't seem like a very Mamedyarov opening to me, especially as white, which is where I'm trying to learn things, because it's very much transposed into a kind of King's Indian attack kind of game, because that's what it is, which is more like an e4 or delayed e4 opening, and it doesn't really bear many similar aspects to d4 openings which I'm playing. So I know a little bit, so I'm happy to make the commentary, but I don't know, a bit disappointed in terms of my own learning, I guess. h3, bishop h5. h3 can always be useful in these King's Indian attack lines. One of the main ideas is you play this knight into a more aggressive square, and the way to do that is to get it pointing at their king. The best way to do that in these positions is via d2 to f1 to g3 usually. Sometimes via h2, but oftentimes this knight comes to h2. Then you can combine this h3 with g4 move, which pushes away this bishop. This knight can go to g3. When you move this knight to h2, because h4 is covered by this bishop, you can then play the f-pawn push as well. I mean, Fischer used this a lot as white against a lot of sideline openings like the French and the Caro-Kann. It's just kind of a consistent plan you can do against all these openings. Because black's best plan kind of transposes to the same in a lot of situations. Where basically he's going to go for this e6, d5 setup, very French-like, and then he pushes this c5. It's also very Caro-Kann-like because he's managed to get this bishop out first, if you will. This knight f1 is played, and queen b6. So black's plan in these kind of King's Indian positions is to get counterplay on the queen side. You can you can do that a few ways. You can put pressure on the center via this, and then pile up along the c file, or you can push this b pawns as well, b and a pawns, and just attack this pawn center. This way is more direct, but personally I don't like it quite as much because I have less space, and I feel like this queen is just restricting my b pawn, but both are fine, both are good. In combination with the knight e8 here, your general plan is like knight c7 to knight b5, just ganging up on d4. So you force white to either play this g4 quickly, or allow us to trade off this f3 knight, in which case there's one less defender on d4 again. Basically this bishop gets tied down to the b2 pawn, and if we play b3 at any point, we kind of retain the tension on d4 by not taking there yet, and then we have the option of playing c4 to undermine this. If this gets traded off, for example, our pawn on c4 takes on b3, this leaves the c3 pawn weaker, which is good with a combination of rook on c8, or if he manages to take with his b3 pawn on our c4 pawn, then we want to be able to recapture with the rook here again. Again, the c3 is weak. So it's just a kind of, thing like that. So g4 is played. I mean, bishop g6 are only move. Okay, let me just check. Yeah, okay, so, yeah, draw agreed here, I guess, because there's no more moves. Yep. Okay. Well, that's a very disappointing game, I guess. Yeah. I don't know, I mean, this position is very playable for both sides, so... It's pretty evenish, but whatever. I'll put the engine on. Oh, what's the quick way to do that? So I forget now. Oh no, there it is.